Good morning and welcome to Carolina Cares, an iHeart Media production. Hailing from our flagship family of stations in Columbia, my name is Tyler Ryan here this morning. And we're going to get into, kind of law enforcement. We're going to speak with I guess you could say, the top law enforcement officer of the state of South Carolina and dabble in some politics and talk about some issues that really touch many of us and really are big hot button issues, namely internet crimes against children, keeping our kids safe, human trafficking, and some of the other duties that go into being the Attorney General in the state of South Carolina. Speaking of the Attorney General in the state of South Carolina, Alan Wilson, working through his third term, having been so elected in 2010. Alan also, I should say Colonel Alan Wilson. He serves as a colonel for the National Guard as well. Sir, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tyler. It is always good to be with you, and I have to say, happy 2020. I don't think I've seen you since we're 2.5 months into the year, and I don't think you and I have seen or spoken.
I think you're probably right.
It's been a busy year already.
We've corrected it now.
Done. It's good to be with you, my friend.
You too, my friend. You too. So let's learn a little bit about you. I mean, obviously, people, I'm sure, they hear your name, the Attorney General's office. You're definitely, I think, high profile on the national scale. I know that you're very involved with other states and attorneys generals, your colleagues from the other 50 states. And of course, your father's a known entity in the state of South Carolina, Congressman Joe Wilson. But you yourself really are, I think, a household name, but maybe people don't know a lot about you, kind of how you got to sit in the Attorney General's chair.
Well, I don't know if I'm a household name, but the position that I hold, the title of Attorney General, is one of those type of positions that when you talk to people and you ask them about the Attorney General, it's probably the most important position in government that they know nothing about. In fact, I always joke when I talk to people and I say, hey, let me know if I can ever do anything for you. People inevitably say, I hope I never need your help, because they believe they're being indicted or sued. Sure. And the Attorney General is so much more than those things. Those are the things that we do, but it is a very important position. I mean, just a quick historical footnote. The position of Attorney General was created in 1698 under the King of England, under a charter, long before there was a United States, before there was a South Carolina. And so for 322 years, if I'm doing the math right, there's been an Attorney General in this area, and I'm the 51st that we know of in history. Mm-hmm. So
I guess at that point, prior to the Revolution, to the Constitution, to the laws we have now, and even before South Carolina, very much the same, only you would have been enforcing, obviously, the Queen's law, or the King, I guess, at the time, but the King's laws, and going through a very similar process.
Absolutely. The Nicholas Trott was the first Attorney General, lived in Charleston, received his grant from the King of England, and basically enforced His Majesty's laws in the Carolinas.
They wore wigs back then too, right?
Yes, and I'm thinking about bringing the wig back. I got a little coverage up top issue that I'm dealing with. So
it's a good look, man.
It is a good look. I'm gonna try to bring the wig back.
I'm a fan of capes too.
Capes?
I think that if you strolled across the State House grounds in a wig and a cape, I think that would make a statement that you were here and serious.
It would definitely make a statement. I can hear it now. He's lost his mind, folks. Finally, Wilson's gone over the deep end.
Oh my goodness! So tell us a little bit about you, how you got to the Attorney General's position. You were elected as I said, in 2010. You've been reelected a couple of times. Obviously, doing a fine job in the eyes of South Carolinians, at least the majority of them. Put it that way, I suppose.
Enough of them.
Enough,
yeah.
Kind of tell us about your journey to this role.
So, like, when I was a little kid, I wasn't one of these kids that said, hey, one day I want to grow up and be Attorney General. I didn't even know I wanted to be an attorney until I got probably into my college age range. But after college, I kind of floated about a bit. I didn't go straight to law school. I had about 3 years out of college where I kind of floated and kind of figured out what I wanted to do, and then decided to go to law school and did 3 years of law school and was a law clerk for a judge. It was while I was a law clerk for a judge that I discovered my love of the courtroom. My dad, before he was in Congress, was a real estate attorney, so did a lot of transactional work, and that's what I grew up being exposed to. And so I just figured I'd go into family business and help my dad do real estate closings and things like that. It was being a law clerk where I just fell in love with the pageantry of the courtroom and the ability of men and women to go in there and go into mutual combat, in terms of arguing the law in front of a judge and a jury. And it was just something I was very fascinated by. And so when I left my clerkship with that judge, I went and worked for the 11th Circuit Solicitor's Office. Was there for a little while. Started off in family court, moved to general sessions where criminal cases are tried.
And the 11th Circuit is Lexington, Saluda, that area, folks who don't know.
Donnie Myers was a solicitor, and I was in Lexington. You're right. I should use the county, not the circuit title number. But did that for a little bit. And then, of course, I was deployed to Iraq, so I kind of had to leave my job as a prosecutor for a little over a year and went and served with my unit and came back and resumed serving as an assistant solicitor in Lexington County. And then an opportunity came up for me to work in the Attorney General's office under then Attorney General Henry McMaster. And
who's now our governor.
Who's now our governor.
Yep.
And by the way, I didn't say this earlier, but I did an internship right after college for Charlie Condon as an intern in the Attorney General's office. I was making coffee and doing papers and things like that and sweeping the floor. But I came and worked for Attorney General McMaster at that time, and I prosecuted a lot of child abuse cases, violent crimes, gun crimes, things like that, and was there for a few years. And then I went into the private sector in a civil litigation law firm. And then the opportunity to run for Attorney General opened itself, and I was approached by a number of people, said you ought to throw your name in the hat. Never dreamed that I would. If I ever ran for office, I certainly didn't expect to run for statewide office right out the gate. But, even a blind squirrel gets a nut every once in a while. And
you skip the whole school board and selectmen and all that kind of stuff and go right to the top, man.
But being in the military, being an officer in the military, serving overseas in a combat theater, it really made me fall in love with the idea of leading an organization, whether it was a really tiny organization or a very large organization. And I loved being a prosecutor. I mean, I absolutely adored the idea of going in a room and representing victims and prosecuting people who had violated the law. And so when you combine those two, leading an organization and being a prosecutor, leading the chief law enforcement agency or the prosecution agency in the state seemed to be a perfect fit for me. And and I ran against some wonderful people. They were tough opponents and competitors, and then of course, but I was lucky and worked really hard, and the people gave me an opportunity, and they gave me a second opportunity in 2014, and then a year and a half ago they gave me a third opportunity to serve.
So you're doing something right.
I'm doing something right, despite myself. But listen, I tell people all the time that being Attorney General is the office of Attorney General is not my office. It belongs to the people of South Carolina. I'm holding it in trust for them for a very short period of time. And every 4 years, I get to go in for a job interview to see if they want to retain me. And I'm grateful for all people for allowing me to serve in this capacity. I love it. It really is a wonderful experience for me.
Speaking with Attorney General Alan Wilson here for the great Palmetto State, the South Carolina Attorney General. Let's kind of break down, go to civics class for just a minute, and how you fit the Attorney General's office fits into the bigger cog. You've got the local jurisdictions, you have magistrate court, you get to the solicitor level, like you alluded to, the Richland County, the prosecutor, the DA. If you watch a lot of Law and Order, the DA is the solicitor in South Carolina, and then you got fences there, and then you go to your spot, which can be the Attorney General, and of course the upper cog is going to be the U.S. court and U.S. prosecutors and things like that. But kind of where does all that fit in where you are in that big cog we call criminal justice?
So I'm not going to be like a law professor. I'm going to keep this very, lay person. But basically in our state, and you're right, we call them solicitors, people who watch these law shows. It might be a state's attorney or district attorney in another state, but we call them solicitors, and there are 16 of them. They're elected by local jurisdictions called in-circuits, which could be, anywhere from 2 counties to 5 counties, depending on how rural it is, but there's 16 solicitors. Now, they are independently elected, but under the Constitution, I'm the chief prosecutor of the state, so I have some constitutional oversight over those 16 circuit solicitors. Generally speaking, though, we work well together, and I stay in my lane, they stay in theirs. I support them when they need it. Sometimes they ask us for support because I have more resources in some ways than they do. But we do act a little bit independent. The U.S. Attorney's Office there's one U.S. Attorney in South Carolina. They work for the Attorney General of the United States. And we're in 2 different jurisdictions. I don't work for them. They don't work for me. But we do collaborate, whether it's on drug trafficking cases, human trafficking cases. There are a lot of cross-jurisdictional boundary issues that we deal with, and we work very well with our federal partners. But as the state's prosecutor goes, I'm the chief prosecutor at the state level in our jurisdiction.
Okay. So cases will go up and down. You may start out in cases that may start at a local level in Saluda, say, and it goes to the 11th Circuit. This 11th Circuit prosecutor, and then would get bumped up. What kind of case would get bumped up to you versus just a drug offense or maybe a homicide?
So 98%, 99% of all cases that originate in a circuit, they get tried and prosecuted by the local solicitor and the local sheriff or law enforcement departments that are in those jurisdictions. Right. They don't come to us. Now, here's when they do come to us. We take a lot of cases that involve a conflict. You have a solicitor has to prosecute maybe an elected official, maybe a county council member that approves their budget, or a sheriff. They can't handle those. It might be an officer-involved shooting. They work with those law enforcement agencies. They can't handle the officer-involved shooting case, so they might send it to us. It might be a member of their own staff has a relative who's a defendant or a victim. They might conflict those cases up. Some cases involve hyper-technical information like internet crimes against children. Most solicitors don't really do those types of cases. Human trafficking, while they do have the ability to do those, sometimes those involve grand jury. Grand jury is another thing that we have that the local solicitor doesn't. Their grand juries are people who they stamp an indictment, true bill and indictment that gives them jurisdiction to prosecute a case. Our grand juries are much more involved in that. They allow us very powerful investigative tools to go after public corruption, environmental crimes, gangs, drug trafficking, human trafficking. I mean, white-collar type corruption case, not just corruption, but securities cases, things that involve tens of millions of pages of documents and evidence. Okay. So we do a lot of the complex stuff. They do a lot of the local violent crimes.
Okay. And speaking of indictments, is it in fact possible to indict a ham sandwich?
Yes.
Okay.
You can here's one thing that we do. Yeah, that is funny. But one thing that we also do that the solicitors don't do is that we handle all of the post-conviction relief cases and all of the appeals. And basically, here's the difference. Now, here's where I become a law professor.
Sure.
And I'm going to do as simply as I can. If you are convicted of a crime and you're sitting in jail, you have due process. You have the ability to challenge your conviction and try to get out of jail. And that's what everybody that's sitting in jail does. So they file one of two things. A post-conviction relief, we call it a PCR, and that's where you say, my lawyer was an idiot or the prosecutor was corrupt.
Right.
Or both.
And that's the appeal. You might say on appeal.
Well, no, that's a PCR. That's when you say my lawyer was an idiot or the prosecutor was corrupt. I'm oversimplifying it. An appeal is where you say the judge was an idiot. Really? So one is dealing with how your case was handled by the lawyers involved in the case, the prosecutor and or the defense attorney. They might have been ineffective assistance of counsel or prosecutorial misconduct, which is alleged. And if the judge applies the law incorrectly, you can challenge it on appeal. So you're challenging the judge's application of the law with an appeal. You're challenging the attorney's handling of your case with a PCR. And those usually go right alongside each other. Both of those things are generally filed. But we do all of that for the solicitors. And we also do it for ourselves. Wow. So the average solicitor's office will be anywhere from a very rural office of, maybe 10 to 12 people all the way up to maybe 60 or 70 people. I have 300 people in my office and 90 lawyers. 90 lawyers.
Wow. I didn't realize that the AG's office was, I guess it would have to be, considering what the weight of and the gravity of stuff you do. But I guess until you hear those numbers, you don't really think about, that's a lot.
No, it is a lot. And we're in all 46 counties, whereas the solicitors have to stop. They can't go outside their jurisdiction without our permission. They have to stay within those jurisdictional lines where we can go anywhere in the state of South Carolina. We also train all the victims advocates in the state, and we do all the statistical analysis. I chair, along with a young woman that represents me, the Human Trafficking Task Force, which is charged with, investigating and combating and, kind of figuring out the scope of human trafficking in our state. And so that's been a big issue the last 7 or 8 years. But it's a really big office. There are a lot of good people working in it, and I am really honored to be working with them to try to protect our state.
I love it. Alan Wilson, the Attorney General here of the Palmetto State. And I want to kind of get into a couple of the big things we hear a lot about. The ICAC teams, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which obviously does exactly that. In fact, and listeners know, many folks know, I'm also wear that law enforcement hat, and I was one of the original members of the state of Vermont's ICAC team back in 1999. And so I have a pretty good knowledge and understanding, at least back then when we had dial-up, of how the ICAC teams work and that mission of what you... It's almost like when you dig a hole in the sand at Folly Beach, right? I mean, there's so much out there that we have to protect our kids from.
In the ICAC, and we say we're going to use ICAC, stands for Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. It started off at the federal level, came down to the state level. At first, it was really kind of an educational thing, and then it all of a sudden developed about 15 years ago. It developed more of a law enforcement component. When I became Attorney General, our task force had about 44 law enforcement agencies in the state that were participating in it. Now we have over 116. And people say, well, what does it do? Think about this. There was a show years ago called To Catch a Predator. Okay, remember the guys that would
Chris
try
Hansen.
to Chris Hansen,
Yep.
right? The NBC or MSNBC. And so in those shows, it was some guy sitting in his mom's basement trying to, woo a 13-year-old, what they believe was a 13-year-old girl or boy, into having sex with them, and then they show up at the house to meet the child because the parents are allegedly out of town, and they show up in their tidy whities with a bottle of Zima, right? And then Chris Hansen's there with a film crew, and they just freeze, and of course the cops come in and arrest them, and it's a lot. ICAC is a lot more complicated than that, and that oversimplifies what it is. But that is it's out there protecting the public from predators and pedophiles preying on kids. It also deals a lot in the child porn arena. There's a lot of it out there. And so they do. It's a very technical crime too, because it involves having to go into people's computers, and you got to get search warrants and things like that. But it's we have a lot of forensic auditors and computer scientists that are dealing with it. But we're going out there and we're trying to track down these predators. We're also trying to educate young people and educate parents and families. The internet is the new wild, wild west. And remember, you and I are old enough to remember, I didn't get my first cell phone until right at the end of college. That was in the 90s.
Yeah, I think so. You're right.
And having a cell phone was a luxury thing. Remember the bag phones, Yeah. And then of course I had the big brick that flipped open. And it had the fake antenna, the plastic antenna that did nothing.
You might remember those. Dun, 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 dun.
Yes, and the little antennas, really, they weren't there. They didn't do anything. They just boost consumer. I couldn't get a signal to lift this piece of plastic, and all of a sudden the phone works better. But that's what I grew up with. My kids, and I mean, they had these Xboxes and PlayStation, all these game consoles. They have iPhones and Android phones, and the World Wide Web is all around them. It permeates every aspect of their world,
right.
And these kids grow up in this, and the social media platforms that the teenagers are using and the tweens are using, it really opens them up to being preyed upon by people online who mean to do them harm. And parents, and I'm guilty of this as much as any other parent, it is easy to become complacent.
Sure.
Your kids are screaming in the back of the car on a family trip. It's so easy to throw the phone and the iPad back to them and say, "Here, just be quiet, watch Netflix." And they sit there. But we have got to be smarter as parents in a society when teaching kids how to be good digital citizens of the internet. And we're not just there to protect kids from predators and pedophiles. We're also there to protect children from each other. Cyberbullying, sexting, a lot of the things that they do, it really complicates things in the schoolyard. And so educating the schools and the school-age kids, as well as the school administrators, on the dangers of the internet, as well as the benefits, is something that we do.
And it seems like every day there's a new app, there's a new thing, and it like I said, it's almost impossible to protect everybody. You can only educate. Really, that's kind of probably the biggest thing, right? I mean, it's educating, trying that prevention versus the cure. The ounce of prevention being better than a pound of cure.
Absolutely. I went and spoke at a school one time, and I was talking to about 800 kids. And after I spent an hour talking to them, there were a handful of parents that came up to me because they were there. They were invited as well. And one of these dads came up to me and said, "Thank you for teaching us about the dangers of the internet. I'm not letting my 13-year-old get on the computer again until she's 18. And I said, "Sir, that's the worst thing you can do." Right. And he says, "You just spent an hour telling me how horrible and evil and death and mayhem on the internet." And I said, "Well, I was doing that to shock you into action, but here's the thing. How did you teach your daughter to walk across a busy intersection or a street? Do you take your child and you keep them away from streets until they're 18 and then say, good luck? Or when they're little, you start by carrying them, and then you hold their hand, and then pretty soon you don't have to hold their hand. Pretty soon you don't even have to walk beside them. You just let them walk in front of you, and you watch them to make sure they look both ways. And after a while, you don't even have to be with them. They know how to cross the street because you have done it with them so many times and coached them along the way that they develop good habits on crossing the street. And now you can trust a 17-year-old kid to cross the street without being hit by a bus. That's what the internet is. And that's what I told the parents. I says, you have got to be, they're in the internet already. You have got to be a coach. You have to be a parent, and you have to walk through this world with them so that when you're not around, they'll exercise good habits.
That's a brilliant analogy. I never really thought about the crossing the street analogy, but that really is brilliant. But you're right. I mean, it's like at school, you want to shield them from, kids who say bad words. You can't. It's just not going to happen. It's about using good judgment as to when they hear these bad words, whether they choose to repeat them or do the right thing and not. You're right. It's the education and decision making, not putting the blinders on, because that's never going to work. That's
right. And again, you have got to be engaged. If your kid has a phone, like my kids have phones, but those things are loaded. I got software on there. I'm monitoring. Inspect what you expect, parents. Inspect what you expect. And here's the thing. When I was a child sex crimes prosecutor and you had all these parents would come up to me who said, I never dreamed that this would happen to me, that my kid would be preyed upon. Or here's one I've heard. My kid would never sext. They would never send a sexualized photo or video of themselves.
Sure.
I mean, for all those guys out there, we all had 15-year-old lizard brains at one time. Medulla oblongata hadn't been developed fully yet, and so you act like a caveman. But kids, teenagers, they have adult bodies with adult desires, but they don't have the maturity and wisdom to know how to exercise those desires. And I'm being cavalier and funny now, but to be serious, kids have committed suicide.
Oh, yeah.
From, there was a girl a number of years ago who was dating a guy, sent him a picture, a provocative photo, and of course the next day they weren't dating, and what did he do? Shared it with everyone. That thing spread through the school and then the school district and then the community, and she got hazed for it. She got picked on so bad that she took her own life. And, I mean, this stuff is real. I mean, and when I was growing up, when you were growing up, we got picked on the playground. Sure. Maybe we had to worry about the behind the school. But right now, these kids can't leave the school when they go home. It's all around them. And when they have those phones and those social media platforms, the bullying follows them home. They can't get away from it.
Yeah, you're right. When I used to run from, the bully, as long as I made it to my house, man, I was safe.
You got in that front door, you can peek through the window, and you were good for, at least till the next day. But here, these kids, they go in behind those closed doors, and you can tell them to shut off the internet. But
that's not going to work either.
It's not going to work either. They're too ingrained in it.
Speaking with Attorney General for South Carolina, Mr. Alan Wilson. Let's pivot just a little bit, although I think a lot of this still is dealing with the internet as probably a primary driver. But let me the definition, because there's the phrase human trafficking is used a lot. At least one definition I found that has to be real because I found it on the internet. Human trafficking is the act of recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining a person for compelled labor or commercial sex acts with use of force, fraud, or coercion. That's the broad general definition of human trafficking.
You're reading the statute out of our laws. Yeah, absolutely.
What is human trafficking? I mean, it's not necessarily just kidnapping, right? There are people who are human trafficked who go home at night every night and go to the job every day, right? I mean, let's talk about what that is.
One of the top 5 relationships from a human trafficking report last year identified a family member or a family friend who was doing the trafficking. Oftentimes, it is a known relative or friend of the family doing the trafficking. And frequently the trafficking victim is dating the trafficker. And so it's not like in the movie with Liam Neeson, Taken, where, or a James Bond movie, someone's backpacking through Europe and they get kidnapped.
Right.
And forced at gunpoint with a ski mask. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. There's a lot of, in the prosecution world, we say there's 2 kind of pimps or traffickers. There's the guerrilla pimp and the Romeo pimp. The guerrilla pimp is the guerrilla warfare. When you think guerrilla warfare, it's the guy with the ski mask saying, do this or I'm going to kill you or your family. Right. The Romeo is the person who segregates someone from society, like a teen that's down on themselves and gets them away from their family and then ends up getting that teen to be either completely reliant on them for sustenance, for room and board, for their fixing their drug habit once they get them addicted to drugs, or maybe even gets them to fall in love and promises them marriage in the future and babies. And,
but first you got to work to make the money for us.
Exactly. And this happens. I mean, I've talked to human trafficking survivors, people who were in the lifestyle for many years, who tell me they didn't even realize that they were a victim. And here's the thing. That Romeo pimp or that Romeo trafficker that's wooed you into this and has you dependent, what happens? What do they turn into the moment you say no? They turn into the guerrilla pimp, which is the person who, like a guerrilla warrior, would point a gun at you or a knife to your throat or threaten you or break a rib or something. And that has happened time and time and time again. And here's the thing. Let's not stereotype traffickers. Let's not stereotype human trafficking victims. They can be of any socioeconomic class. They can be of either gender. They can be of any race. They can be from anywhere. South Carolina sits between 2 of the top 20 human trafficking hubs in the country. When you look at Atlanta, Georgia, and then also Charlotte, North Carolina. So we are well situated. We have a coastal region, which has a high tourism area. And then you look at high sporting events where there's a lot of high traffic. And, these are boons for the human trafficking world. And you look at worldwide, human trafficking on a worldwide scale is a $150 billion industry.
Unbelievable.
40 million victims every year. And the U.S. is the number one destination. And you look at where South Carolina is, we have it going on in this state. Now it's going on in every other state.
And I do want to point that out. I did pull a map. If you're looking at 2018 stats, and it's a color-coded map because I'm better with pictures. So I looked
We
at
like to color a picture for you there, Tyler.
It's a good thing. Bringing the highlighter. But, looking at the map, there is not one state that doesn't have this issue. There's not, you think maybe Nebraska, everything's safe there. Alaska, every state, Hawaii, Alaska, and the lower 48, every single state on the map has got it going on. Now, granted, some are more active than others. Atlanta, Charlotte, I'm sure Miami, those areas.
Well, and let me say
it is a U.S.-wide problem.
It is, and you said something. You said more active. Well, so this past year, we announced our reports, our numbers, and we used the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And last year, we had a 370% or 360% increase in the number of calls. I think we had 678 victims last year identified through that hotline in South Carolina alone. And that was over nearly 400% increase. And I identified 5 counties. And some of the people that were like economic developers and law enforcement in those counties were like, why did you out us like that? And they saw it as like a bad thing that they were identified as a top 5 county. And I said, no, this is a good thing. Human trafficking has always existed in your county. The fact that you're in the top 5 county for reports doesn't mean that you have the most activity. Mm-hmm. It means that people in your community are aware of it and they're reporting it more. Right. So in states or counties or communities that don't report it, that doesn't mean it's not happening. If we took all the police and highway patrol off the highways of South Carolina for a week, we would see a drop-off in bad driving, reckless driving, DUIs.
Everyone all of a sudden would follow the law.
All of a sudden, we'd have no stats showing that any bad driving. Does that mean that that's not happening? Of course not. The same is true with human trafficking. The fact that we're going up in our reports, I think, is a good thing, not because I'm cheering on human trafficking. I'm cheering on people's awareness of it. It's going up. And that is something I'm really proud of. And we've got a long way to go, but as a state, we've come so far since 2012. Mm-hmm.
And it, like you said, and I think you're right, putting that spotlight on things, it's like when you say, boy, there's a lot more of this going on, a lot more of that. It really is because now we know we have social media. So whether it's human trafficking or other types of crimes or whatever, you say, boy, it happens a lot more than it used to. Maybe not. We now know about it. The information is key. We can be vigilant. We can realize and look and see the signs before it gets out of control. If something, a change of behavior in your son or daughter or things like that, you can say, it may not be human trafficking, but there's something going on and we can be more hyper vigilant. Like you said, taking care of our own children, teaching them decisions, but also being a part of that parenthood. But it's not just kids, right? I mean, we're talking adults.
Absolutely.
Happens to as well.
Absolutely. Adults are very much victimized in this crime as well.
Speaking with Alan Wilson, I know you have a lot of, and I want to have you back on the show again soon, and perhaps ask listeners maybe to send in some questions and just specific stuff. I know the office does a lot. You've got a lot of high-profile cases I'd love to get into at some point, and we'll have to do that again, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, the next time we come in, we can talk. We know we have a number of high-profile public corruption cases. We had this year we've had the coronavirus. We've had an impeachment. We've had a national election that's currently going on, but 2 weeks ago in South Carolina. So I mean, it's just been a busy year, and it's still very early. So our cup overfloweth with work and stuff.
Sure.
So, but I'm really excited to be here with you in studio, Tyler, and thank you for helping us share the word about some of the good work that the people in the Attorney General's office are doing. This is a passion of mine.
What is a good website for folks right to you direct to the office?
Well, I mean, if you Google South Carolina Attorney General's office, you'll go straight to us, or you could go to scag.gov. And of course, you can reach out to me through there. One thing I do want to say to your listeners, a lot of people try to reach out to me directly through social media. And while I do passively look at social media, that is not the best way to talk to me directly. Sometimes, people will talk to someone on my staff through Facebook. We have a Facebook page. That's not the best way to talk to me because I would never be able to even be with my kids or work or do anything.
Tweet at Alan Wilson.
Yeah. That's right. Can you come by tonight and talk to me about X? No, call the office. Anyone that wants to meet with me or talk to me has a right to petition and do that. And of course, we do people like to go on social media to tell us why they don't like us and where they think we're wrong on stuff. But hey, guys, an attaboy every once in a while is appreciated because we have a lot of wonderful people in our office working hard. And anytime you can give us a shout out on social media, we're grateful for that as well.
We'll do it. Alan Wilson, the Attorney General of South Carolina, joining us here on Carolina Cares. I appreciate you joining us. We'll put links for you. Just go to WVOC or just type in Carolina Cares and you'll find us, and I'll put links directly, not his social media, but to the office of the Attorney General, if you can do anything for that. My name is Tyler Ryan, your host for Carolina Cares and iHeart Media Production. Thank you for joining us, and I will speak with you in 7 days.